Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here. I truly am. I've always been slightly in love with Istanbul, and so I jumped at the chance of coming here to be able to talk today. No, not to talk today, in fact, just to come to this wonderful, wonderful city. I will try not to bore you for too long. I believe I've got 20 minutes, and the 20 minutes that have been allotted to me is talking about saving recipes from oblivion. It's ridiculous, really, that I should be talking about Thai food because I'm a bloody Australian. But I went to Thailand some 30 years ago and I fell in love with the place. Not the food, first of all, but the people, the culture, the country, the insouciance with which the Thais lived their life. They lived their life to a different beat to the one that I certainly was familiar with, the beat of a Western culture with its rather materialistic approach to living. It was shocking. It was distressing, it was confusing, it was confounding, it was wonderful, it was enthralling, and I'm still, I must tell you, marching under that thrall. I'm still enthralled, still now today. But it was never really about the food, at least to begin with. I liked it. But it did not have the same, I believed, the same complexity or heritage or provenance or discipline or extraordinary ingredients that I believed Western food had. Until I met this remarkable woman through a partner of mine, or through my partner, and she cooked with, if you'll excuse me for quoting Claudia Rodan, with an inherited skill. I still remember in your book where you wrote that term, and it struck me because it's simply, Claudia, something that resonates across all old cultures, where you have old women, no, old cooks, normally women, cooking with a skill that has been inculcated for generations. And this woman, I can still see the dish that made me, that was, I suppose, forgive me for being so pretentious, my culinary epiphany, where I fell from my Western high horse into the dust of Siamese cooking. And I still can see the dish now. You must forgive me. I've brought no photographs. I've only brought my tongue and my story. The dish itself was something called Geng Som Pla Chon Tod by Makam, which was just simply a sour orange curry with some deep fried freshwater fish with some sour tamarind leaves. It sounds rather prosaic, but when I tasted it, it made me realize that the type of food that I was eating had a greater depth, a greater character, a greater heritage than I had erstwhile thought. The honed precision of tastes, the deft balance of seasoning, the careful and solicitous way in which the fish and the curry was made indicated to me, then a shallow cook and a callow cook, that there was much more going on than just merely a curry alone. It was a culinary epiphany, or in fact it was a starting block, and I dived into that pool, that culinary pool called Siamese cooking, Thai cooking, because it made me aware that there was so much more to eating or cooking than food alone. You see, Thai food, and this is why I think its recipes do need to be saved from oblivion, is more than just cooking. It's a social enterprise. Claudia alluded to it earlier on, where it's a community. And all the speakers in their own way have alluded to the fact that food is so much more than cooking alone. It can be related to community, it can be related to memory, it's related to space and architecture, it's related to ingredients, it's related to salvaging the environment, it's related to being a steward of that environment, it's related to caring for people who need more from their environment. Food is a metaphor, is a vehicle for so much more. And in Thai cooking, it is fundamentally a vehicle to express the community. It reinforces community values. It reinforces community tastes. And for instance, I will allude back to the sour orange curry. by eating that, you start to create the bond of family, because what happens is that you eat a dish like that and it remains with you, like your grandmother's tortellini, like my mother's roast chicken, like your grandmother's favorite food that you can recall. It reinforces and gives comfort and succour and ensures that there is some type of connection with the past. And so with Thai food, because it is such a such a significant culinary culture, because the Thais themselves express themselves perhaps culturally in two ways: through their food and through their religion. If I wanted to be glib, I'd say if I wanted to be glib, rather, I could say that it is through their soul and through their stomach. They are themselves mainly Thai. And through their stomach, they will do the most extraordinary things, because you see, they are an agricultural people who express gratitude, conviviality, obligation. All aspects of any type of social intercourse is expressed through food and through cooking. And you can see that on a daily basis when people come together and they sit down and they enjoy their food. I often think to myself that Thais are the people who are most addicted to food. I'm biased, I confess, but I know that I work with Thais, and I've worked with Thais now for longer than 20 years, and I know that they're obsessed with food. They are either cooking it, usually because I'm forcing them to, or they're going to the market to purchase it, or if they're not doing that, it's because they're eating it. And finally, if they're not doing those other things, it's because they're asleep, and I'm certain they'll be dreaming of it. It is such a profound aspect of their culture. They're obsessed by it. But here is where it leaves the material. They're not only obsessed by it because it tastes so damn good, but because it expresses more than just food alone. And you can see that every morning in Thailand, where they will feed their monks as a religious obligation in order to feed the soul of their nation, the monks, and also improve their karmic allotment or their karmic benefits. Food is the means by which one can improve one's life in the future. And because of aspects of Buddhism, they are mindful and careful and assiduous in developing recipes that are careful and focused and honed. It is one reason why Thai food is so remarkable. And so there is that juncture between the material and the spiritual amongst the Thais, where food is more than just food alone, more than just community, more than just architecture, more than just about the environment. It's something that's beyond that, supernatural even, where it supersedes, transcends the material, as it were, because it allows them to improve their life in the future, in the next life. I know of no other country that has that aspect to cooking. It is remarkable. And it's ongoing. You see it every day still. It's still a culture that is in continuous operation of its traditional attributes of its food. But Thailand's a complicated place. I harken back to a time before it was called Thailand, to Siam, which has led me that I found fascinating as a cook. Ancient Siam had a regal culture as well, not dissimilar, I suspect, to the Ottoman court and its culture when it came to ritual and ornate practices to help reinforce the status of the court and the sultan, or indeed, in the case of Siam, its king. At the apex of society, just as Buddha's monks had to be cared with and cooked for with a diligence that was rare, even more so for a king. And so there was a whole range of elaborate recipes that were developed in order to express the fealty, the loyalty, and the devotion to their monarch. Now, I'm not a monarchist, But I must say their devotion has given rise to a variety, a genre of cooking that is outstanding, that is remarkable in its Baroque complexity, that is impossible almost to achieve today or to develop today, because simply it was devised at a time when cost and time were the least considered commodities of the community. It's beyond just merely a physical operation. And so at the apex of society, people were served these most delicate sweetmeats and treats that were meant to titillate the flagging palate of a rather sated king who would be indulged in every way, because it was the state in which he was born and ought to be maintained. And so the kitchens of ancient Siam would devise these remarkable dishes where days and days and days of preparation was prepared, where days and days of food was prepared in order to be able to serve the king a minuscule dish, a subtle dish, a little dainty that may mean nothing to him, but was an example of their fealty and their capacity to devote themselves to ensure that whatever they did with the idea of Buddhist mindfulness was done to their best. To me, that was striking. It's a gone world. It's a world that's fallen into abeyance. It's lost. But it's a fascinating world because it can show you the complexities that some cultures can go to in order to make and vindicate the status of people and to reinforce the way that they believe the world is and their culture ought to perform. And I found that mesmerizing. The Thais have the Thais themselves, when they were cooking like this, never followed recipes, or never wrote recipes down, rather, I should say, to bring it back to some relevance to what I'm leading to. Because you see, they cooked on a daily basis. They cooked with such regularity. It was as if with inculcated skill. They knew exactly what to do. Their hands, like the Res Dore, whose hands knew how to roll the tortellini, so too these Siamese cooks knew exactly how to cook. And when I first met this woman who introduced me to Thai food and led me along the lines of understanding the complexity of Siamese culinary culture, of Thai culinary culture, I never thought that these things could occur, and never did I think that people could cook like that. I still recall with shock and disbelief when she would say to me that she could smell a dish and she'd say it was too salty. Or she could see a dish and she could say that it was cooked at a distance. I now understand that because after 30 years of cooking Thai food and 30 years of cooking food, I understand you become an instinctive cook, you become a natural cook, you can pick up signs that are almost supernatural, almost beyond words, beyond the comprehension, because you have this instinctive appreciation of what's going on. You just use your senses. Because you see, when Thais cook, they follow the taste that they try to achieve. They don't follow a recipe. And indeed, recipes weren't written down until the late 19th century. 1,000 years of culinary tradition was merely spoken about, was put into action. It was never written. The first cookbook that I know of was written in 1890. And it is an insight into a time that has now been lost. As I said, the complexity, the elaborate nature of the cooking, but more importantly as a cook, the delicious results that are worth that labor employed was remarkable. So very different from the streamlined ways of cooking now, with all the restraints and constraints that are required to make a dish. These peoples lavished time and lavished labor without care, because it was an expression of their culture. A rare thing, I think, where one disregards either finances or time in order to do it properly. But to my mind, it's a hallmark of true humanity and of a true high cultural attribute where you pursue something to its utmost irregardless of cost. These cookbooks were started to be written at a time when Siam was under threat of being colonised by the British. And at that time, that Siam started to become aware of Western culture, and they started to become aware of many aspects. And they started to ape many aspects in order to ensure that they could withstand withstand the bludgeoning and greedy European empires. The French and the English. The French who were in Indochina, and the British, of course, who were in Burma. Siam lost a third of its land, but managed through diplomacy and artful skill, because the Thais are incredibly skillful in their art of survival. They managed to survive where other countries did not. But they took on many of the attributes of Western culture in order not to become Westernized, but in order for them to be able to express themselves in a way that those Westerners declared or thought was civilized. One small side effect was that recipe books started to arrive, and the inspiration for the first Thai recipe book is the rather prosaic and not comical, but extraordinary Mrs. Beeton's. It was the first cookbook that came to Siam. It was one of the first cookbooks that was printed in Siam, and it inspired some women at the court to start to write their own books in order to record some of the complexities of their cuisine. But because these women practiced all the time, they were mere aide-memoirs, which just prompted the memory, because you see they knew exactly what they were doing. They needed nothing more than just the occasional brief signposts that would allow them to recall the finer points of the recipe. No quantities were employed. Often whole points of technique were left out because it was assumed that the cook would know what they were doing. They're nebulous and rather daunting for a novice to start to read, because they're incomplete. Because it was the practice that completed the written word, the written word, the recipes that I'm talking about. Because it was an ongoing practice, and those written recipes, merely just described what most people were familiar with. After 1932 and the toppling of the absolute monarchy, that system, that point of high culture fell into quick abeyance. It was discarded and dismissed as antiquated, as elitist, and as defunct. And there's a lot to be said about that. However, with brushing away that ancient system, the schools and the patterns of cooking were also dismissed as well. A great shame, because you see, that type of cooking reminds me of the complexity of a great and high art form. It's as elaborate as a Bach sonata, as beautiful as a Titian, as delicious as Shakespeare's sonnet, where it's crafted with an intensity and a focus that is extraordinary. I have a collection of books that were written from the 1890s onwards that have those rather loose descriptive recipes. I have several thousand of them. I'm very lucky I started to collect them rather early. And to me they're very important to be able to keep and maintain, not just for my usage, because that would be merely indulgent and selfish, but actually to make available to young Thais and to other cooks who might be interested in Thai food, to show the elaborate extent with which people used to approach their cooking and their craft. It's not that they should replicate that, because just as a Bach sonata may not please all, it still nonetheless shows that there is that same capacity that passes from generation to generation for people to express themselves in a manner that befits their time, their generation, and their artistic sensibility. 100 years ago, 150 years ago in Siam, it was much more ornate. Nonetheless, the human capacity to start to express oneself in a culinary way remains the same, even though that execution may be slightly different. Because there are very few written recipes, and because there were very few cookbooks written, very few Thais actually have in their hands the remarkable trove of their culinary heritage. They know about it, but they have little access to it, and that is a tragedy. It means that they are truncated from their past. That doesn't mean they should be shackled to their past, nor compelled to follow their past like some etiquette-bound person who has no ability to innovate. But it is also a tragedy if one doesn't recall the past in order to enjoy the past and maybe derive some benefits from it in order to express it in the future, or in the current, or indeed the future. I'm setting up a library and a research centre to make available my books and also friends' books that will start to be the genesis of a research centre that allows Thais to do that. It's my small little obligation to pay back for all the benefits that I've received from Thailand, and also to pay back in a way that I think will be beneficial. You've heard other cooks tonight and other people tonight talk about their projects and their programs, which are far more meritorious than mine, because after all, it's just merely a little bit of food and some stupid, rather antiquated recipes. Nonetheless, I think it's rather important to save those recipes because they show the capacity of us as human beings to be able to be creative, to be elaborate, to be somewhat illogical at times in the degree in which we devise and express our creativity. The fact that we are more than just mere units of operation, of economic efficiency, where they were prepared to go through the most elaborate, the most expensive, the most time-consuming techniques in order to do their best. To me, it's a timely reminder and a necessary reminder that people are just more than just creatures that must create or must produce, and produce things as efficiently and as streamlined as possible, saving as much money as possible. It shows the glorious, illogical capacity that we have as human beings. And that's why I think recipes ought be saved from oblivion, because it not only allows people to transcend time, the Thai cooks and other cooks to transcend time and see how people cooked in the past, and perhaps enjoy some of the benefits and some of the tastes and some of the techniques and translate it into the future. But it also shows the quirky, eccentric, erratic nature of we as human beings. It's an intangible cultural heritage that we all enjoy. And that's why I believe that old Thai recipes should not be extinct. They need to be preserved and saved from oblivion. Thank you.